The light was a slow, golden liquid, spilling out from the setting sun and painting the sky in soft shades of rose and amber. It was the twilight hour, the quiet, tender space between the day's warm noise and the coming hush of night. Along the babbling brook, where the water meandered over smooth, ancient stones, the last of the sun's glow shimmered and danced, a final, fleeting promise of warmth. The air, which had held the heat of the day, was now cool and crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth, river moss, and the sweet, clean perfume of wild mint that grew along the banks. The mill itself, a sturdy, dark structure of oak and stone, stood with a quiet dignity, its great wooden wheel resting, perfectly still, after a day of patient labor. Old Henrik moved from inside the mill, his movements slow and deliberate, a man in no hurry at all. His footsteps made no sound on the cool, packed-down earth, and he seemed to be a part of the stillness itself. His hands, gnarled and strong from a lifetime of work, went to the heavy wooden mill gate, a simple but solid barrier that had guarded the mill's entrance for more years than any man could count. He slid the thick oak beam into place, the sound a soft, satisfying thump of finality, and the gate closed with a quiet creak of protest from its old hinges. It was a gesture of profound calm, a signal that the day's work was done and the mill was now wrapped in a tranquil safety. He paused for a long moment, his gaze resting on the smooth, dark surface of the brook. He watched as a single leaf, caught on a gentle eddy, spun slowly, a perfect circle on the water. The sound of the brook was a soft, continuous murmur, a peaceful song that had been the backdrop to his life for as long as he could remember. It was the sound of constancy and peace, a sound that brought a quiet comfort to his heart. Then, with the same unhurried grace, he reached for the flint and steel that hung from a leather strap at his belt. From a niche in the mill's stone wall, he took a small, simple lantern, its frame of forged iron and its glass panels dulled by 1,000 cleanings. He held it in his steady hands and brought the flint and steel together. The sound was a sharp, tiny clink, and then another, and then a spark, a single brief burst of light. He guided the spark to the wick, which was soaked in fine oil. For a moment, nothing. Then, a small, courageous point of flame appeared, flickering softly, as if it were awakening from a long, quiet sleep. He lowered the glass panel with a gentle thump, and the flame was contained, its light casting a warm, honey-colored glow. The gentle crackle of the flame was a tiny, reassuring sound, a living thing in the cooling night. The light filled the glass, chasing away the shadows and illuminating the fine dust of flour that had settled on the mill's outer timbers. The scent of it was subtle but ever present, a sweet, earthy fragrance that was the very smell of sustenance. He took a slow, deep breath, letting the cool night air fill his lungs. The light from the lantern cast a shifting, dancing glow on the stones of the mill, and he ran a hand over the rough-hewn surface, a gesture of quiet affection for the old building. The stone was cool to the touch, and the moss that grew in its crevices felt soft and velvety under his fingertips. He felt the weight of the day's labor in his shoulders, a good, tired ache that was a quiet testament to a job well done. He was a keeper of the wheel, a guardian of the grain, a man whose work was to bring the earth's gifts to the people. It was a sacred trust, a quiet honor he carried with reverence every day. He walked toward the back of the mill, the warm glow of his lantern swinging gently before him. He unlatched a small wooden panel and peered inside, his breath a soft cloud in the cool air. The great waterwheel, which had turned with such patient, rhythmic purpose all day, was now perfectly still, its dark wooden spokes slick with river water and glistening with the last of the light. He ran a hand over one of the spokes, feeling the smoothness of the aged wood and the cool, damp texture of the moss that had begun to grow on its surface. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the wheel's strength, for its silent, ceaseless labor that fed the village. As he closed the panel, and moved back toward the gate, the last sliver of golden light vanished from the sky. The stars, a countless silent host, began to appear, one by one, a soft and perfect dusting of white in the deep black velvet of the heavens. He stood for a long moment, the warm light of his lantern painting a small circle of comfort around him, a single point of soft, living light in the growing dark. The only sounds were the quiet hum of the night, the distant call of an owl, and the constant peaceful murmur of the brook, its song a gentle lullaby for the coming sleep. It was a moment of profound, simple grace, a quiet stillness before the long, peaceful night began. The twilight deepened, and the sky turned from a soft rose to a deep, bruised violet, as if the last remnants of the day were slowly fading into the quiet embrace of the night. The stars that had appeared one by one were now a perfect scattering of white diamonds, their light too faint to cast a shadow, but bright enough to lend a soft luminescence to the world. A cool breeze, gentle and patient, moved through the trees, causing the leaves to whisper a quiet secret to one another. The air, with the fading light, grew sweeter, carrying the mingled scents of damp earth, river water, and the faintest hint of the linseed oil that old Henrik was now tending to. He moved back inside the mill, the warmth of his lantern a small glowing bubble of comfort in the growing gloom. The door, a heavy oaken plank, closed behind him with a low thump, and the sound of the outside world, the crickets, the brook, the distant call of an owl, was softened, made distant, as if the mill itself were wrapped in a protective blanket of sound. Inside, the air was rich with the familiar, calming scent of flower dust, a fine, sweet powder that coated every surface in a soft, white film. Old Henrik knelt by the great wooden axle, a thick, sturdy beam that was the very heart of the mill's inner workings. He reached for a small leather pouch that hung from a peg on the wall, its surface slick and dark with years of use. From it, he pulled a small, smooth stone, a simple, river-worn rock, and a small, stoppered clay jar. He removed the stopper with a soft, gentle pop, and the air was immediately filled with the subtle, clean scent of linseed oil, a fragrance that was both earthy and sweet. He poured a small amount onto the stone, and the oil spread across its surface, a dark, gleaming pool. He then dipped his fingers into the oil, coating them in its cool, smooth texture. He held his hands out for a moment, letting the light of the lantern reflect off the glistening oil on his skin. He then began his work, his hands moving with a deep, knowing reverence. He began by applying the oil to the great wooden gear that sat on the axle. The wood was old and strong, its grain worn smooth by countless turns of the wheel. He rubbed the oil in with slow, circular motions, his fingers tracing the perfect, worn curves of the gear's teeth. The wood, which had been dry and thirsty, drank the oil in, becoming darker, richer, and more lustrous with each passing moment. The subtle scent of the wood mingled with the oil, a quiet, peaceful aroma that was the very essence of patient labor. As he worked, he listened to the low, steady murmur of the brook outside, and the faint, almost imperceptible sound of the waterwheel beginning its turn. The moon, now higher in the sky, had reached a point where its light was now striking the great wheel, and with its light, the wheel began its slow, inevitable journey. A low, gentle groan, a sound that was a quiet sigh of relief from the aged wood, filled the space. The sound was soft and unhurried, a gentle complaint from the ancient timber as it began its nightly task. Old Henrik moved to the axle, applying the oil with the same careful attention. The axle was a thick, unmoving pole of hard oak, and the wood, worn by a lifetime of turning, was smooth and perfect. He applied the oil to the point where the axle met the wheel's hub, the point of greatest friction and stress. He rubbed the oil in with a firm, steady pressure, his hands moving in a quiet, rhythmic pattern. The wood, which had been dry and thirsty, now drank deeply, becoming slick and dark. The subtle scent of the oil was now more pronounced, a quiet, peaceful perfume that promised a night of smooth, uninterrupted work. He finished his task and stood, his gaze moving to the great waterwheel. He could not see it from here, but he could feel its presence, and he could hear its low, rhythmic song. Swish, swish, swish. The sound of the water hitting the wooden blades was a soft, steady rhythm, a lullaby for the coming sleep. The low groan of the wood, now oiled and tended to, was no longer a sound of protest, but a sound of contented purpose. It was a low, gentle whisper in the darkness, a promise of a night of quiet, peaceful labor. He went to the small, dusty window and looked out into the night. The moonlight now bathed the mill in a soft, silvery glow, and he could see the waterwheel, a great, dark circle, turning slowly in the light. The water that flowed over it was a ribbon of pure, liquid silver, and the sound of its movement was a low, soothing murmur. He watched it for a long, quiet moment, a deep sense of satisfaction settling in his heart. The mill was ready. His work was done. The night was now a space for quiet, peaceful labor. The air inside the mill, though warm with the day's work and the lingering scent of flour, was growing still. Old Henrik moved to the tall, narrow windows, their wooden shutters thick and heavy, a solid shield against the outside world. He reached for the latch, a simple iron bar, and with a soft, grinding sound, slid it back. He then pushed on the shutter, a great wooden door in itself, and it swung outward with a low groan of protest from its ancient hinges. As the shutters opened, the cool evening air, fresh with the scent of river water and damp earth, rushed in. It was a gentle, loving breath from the outside world, a cool kiss on the skin. The air inside the mill, which had been warm and heavy, began to stir, carrying the sweet scent of flour and linseed oil on its new currents. The sound of the babbling brook, which had been a low murmur inside the mill, now grew louder, a steady hypnotic whisper that filled the space. Old Henrik stood for a long moment, simply breathing in the night. The light from his lantern, which had been the only source of light inside the mill, now mingled with the last vestiges of twilight that streamed through the open window. He could see the sky, a deep, bruised violet, fading into the coming night. A single star, brighter than the others, appeared, a perfect, brilliant diamond hanging in the deep, silent expanse. He moved to the open window, stepping out onto a small wooden platform that jutted out over the brook. He stood there, his hands resting on the cool, warm wood of the railing, and looked out at the great waterwheel. It was turning now, slowly, with a steady, rhythmic purpose. The low groan of the ancient wood was a soft, contented sigh, and the constant swish and splash of the water was a perfect, peaceful song. The moonlight, a soft, silver glow, was beginning to appear. He watched the wheel turn, a great, dark circle against the now darkening sky. Each spoke, as it dipped into the water, seemed to slice the moon's reflection in half, a perfect, fleeting line of silver that vanished as quickly as it appeared. The sound of the water hitting the wooden blades was a low, soothing murmur, a gentle lullaby for the coming sleep. The air, which had held the last of the day's heat, now grew cooler, and he felt the moisture from the brook on his skin, a fine, damp mist that was refreshing and clean. He was a man who understood the rhythm of the world. He knew the sun brought the light, the rain brought the water, and the wind brought the cool. But the moon brought the magic. It brought a quiet, perfect beauty to the things he loved most. It was a silent companion to his work, a gentle witness to his peaceful labors. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for this time, for this quiet, solitary moment of peace. He took a slow, deep breath, letting the clean, cool air fill his lungs. The scent of the river water, of the damp moss, of the ancient wood of the mill and the sweet perfume of the wild flowers that grew along the banks was a perfect blend. It was the scent of home, the scent of peace. He let his gaze rest on the turning wheel for one last moment, a silent, final appreciation for its patient, tireless work. Then, with a quiet sense of calm satisfaction, he turned slowly back toward the warmth of the lantern light inside the mill, ready for the long, peaceful night of work ahead. The mill was now wrapped in a quiet, nocturnal peace, the sounds of the outside world a distant, lulling hum. Inside, the only light came from Old Henrik's lantern, its soft, honeyed glow painting the rough-hewn walls and floor in a warm, welcoming light. The air was rich with the familiar, calming scent of flower dust, a fine, sweet powder that coated every surface in a soft, white film. The low groan of the water wheel and the rhythmic swish and splash of the water were the mill's own gentle lullaby. Henrik moved toward the great millstones, the very heart of the mill's work. They were two great, round, immovable giants, carved from hard, gray granite. They had been his companions for a lifetime, and he knew every groove, every ridge, every smooth, polished surface of them. He reached for a small brush that hung on a peg, its bristles made of stiff, dried straw. The straw felt brittle and rough in his strong hands, a humble tool for a sacred task. He knelt, his knees finding the cool, hard floor, and he began his work. With slow, gentle strokes, he brushed away the last of the flower dust from the millstones. The sound was a soft, rhythmic scritch, 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 the gentle scratch of the straw against the rough stone. A fine, white cloud of flower dust rose in the lantern light, a soft, ethereal mist that danced in the warm glow before settling back to the floor. The dust was so fine, it felt like velvet under his fingertips, and it smelled of the earth, of the sun, and of the quiet, patient labor of the field. He worked in a silent, meditative rhythm, his movements unhurried and full of reverence. He brushed the dust from the grooves in the stone, from the center where the grain would be poured, and from the outer edges where the flour would spill over. The stone was cool and unyielding to the touch, a heavy, silent presence that had been grinding the village's grain for generations. He ran his hand over the surface, feeling the fine, powdery film that still remained, a quiet memory of the day's work. And as he worked, he began to whisper, his voice a low, breathy hum that was barely a sound at all. It was a private, ancient prayer, a quiet blessing for the stones and for the night's work. "May the grind be steady, the flour be fine," he murmured, his words a soft, rhythmic chant. "May the wheel turn true and the grain be blessed." He spoke of the hands that had sowed the seed, of the sun that had ripened the grain, and of the water that gave the wheel its life. He whispered of the people who would eat the bread from the flour he would make, and he wished them health and peace and contentment. He moved to the great wooden hopper, its broad, open mouth waiting for the grain. He reached inside and ran his hands over the smooth, warm wood, feeling the fine dust that coated it. He then turned his attention to the small wooden shovel that lay by his side, its handle worn smooth by his own hands. He brushed it with the straw brush, a soft hush, hush that cleared it of any lingering dust. He was preparing not just the mill, but his own heart for the night's quiet ritual. The air inside the mill was now perfectly still, the only sounds the soft creak of the water wheel and the gentle trickle of the water. The scent of the flower dust was a rich, comforting presence, a familiar perfume that promised warmth and sustenance. He had tended to every corner, every tool, every great, silent part of his mill. He was a keeper of the light, a guardian of the grind, a man whose work was a quiet, steady rhythm in the heart of the village. He reached out a final time, his hand coming to rest on the great, unmoving surface of the millstone. The stone was cool and smooth under his palm, a solid, tangible connection to the earth and the work he loved. He closed his eyes, his head bowed, and he felt the low, steady vibration of the waterwheel through the floor. The mill was ready. His heart was ready. He stood for a long moment, a single silent prayer in his mind before turning to begin the long, peaceful night ahead. The moon was a silent companion now, a perfect silver coin hanging in the deep velvet sky. Its light, a soft and gentle luminescence, fell over the countryside, bathing the quiet fields and the dark roofs of the village in a serene glow. The air was cool and still, the sound of the brook a constant, peaceful song. Inside the mill, the rhythmic creak and swish of the waterwheel was a comforting presence, a lullaby for the coming night. A low rhythmic sound began to approach from the dirt path that led to the mill. It was the soft thump, thump of footsteps, muffled by the earth, and the faint, dry swish, swish of heavy sacks being carried. Old Henrik, standing by the millstones, felt a quiet sense of readiness settle in his heart. The first grain of the evening had arrived. He moved to the great door, its iron latch cool to the touch, and unbarred it with a soft, grinding sound. A young farmer, his silhouette a dark form against the moonlit path, stood before him. His name was Thomas, a quiet, gentle boy who had been bringing his family's grain to the mill since he was a lad. He carried 2 heavy sacks over his shoulder, their weight pulling his shoulders low. The sacks were made of rough burlap, and the scent of freshly harvested wheat, a sweet, earthy perfume, rose from them. "Good evening, Master Henrik," the boy whispered, his voice low and respectful in the silent night. "Good evening to you, Thomas," Henrik replied, his voice a low, warm hum. "A fine harvest this year, I trust." "The finest, Master Henrik," the boy whispered back, a quiet pride in his voice. "Blessed by sun and rain, as you told us." Henrik nodded, a soft smile on his face. He reached out and, with a silent gesture, took one of the heavy sacks from the boy's shoulder. The weight of it was a familiar comfort, a solid, tangible connection to the earth and its gifts. He felt the coarse texture of the burlap against his hands, the faint grit of the dust from the field. He then turned, with a quiet grunt of effort, began to carry the sack toward the mill's great wooden hopper. The hopper was a large, funnel-shaped trough, its broad, open mouth waiting patiently. It was a simple tool, but a sacred one, a gateway between the raw grain and the fine flour. He tipped the sack, and the grain, 1,000 tiny golden seeds, began to pour out. The sound was a soft, dry whoosh, a gentle rain of life as it fell into the hopper. The scent of the freshly harvested wheat, sweet and earthy, was now more pronounced, filling the air with a beautiful, clean perfume. Thomas, his face quiet with a similar sense of reverence, followed and tipped his own sack. The grain, a river of gold in the lantern light, flowed into the hopper with a gentle hiss. The 2 men stood for a long moment, simply watching the quiet, patient work. The only sounds were the soft creak of the waterwheel, the gentle splash of the water, and the quiet hush of the grain settling in the hopper. When the sacks were empty, Thomas tied their mouths and turned to leave. "A good night's grinding to you, Master Henrik," he whispered, a final respectful farewell. "And a peaceful night's rest to you, Thomas," Henrik whispered in return. And then he was alone again, wrapped in the quiet peace of his mill. He stood by the hopper, his hands resting on the smooth, warm wood, and watched as the first grain of the evening began its slow descent into the heart of the mill. The grain, 1,000 tiny lives, flowed steadily into the small opening at the base of the hopper, a quiet, patient river. He could not see them, but he could hear the faint, subtle grind, grind, grind as the millstones, now perfectly oiled and ready, began their patient work, turning the hard golden seeds into a fine white powder that would be bread for the village. He watched for a long, quiet moment, a deep sense of satisfaction settling in his heart. His work, his purpose, had begun. The night had fully arrived now, a deep, velvet cloak that had settled over the quiet fields and the sleeping village. The sky was a perfect star-strewn canvas of deep black, and the moon, a patient silver companion, cast a luminous glow over the world. The air was cool and still, carrying the mingled scents of damp earth and the sweet perfume of freshly ground flour. Inside the mill, the rhythmic creak and swish of the waterwheel was a low, comforting hum that filled the space. Old Henrik moved from the mill's interior, the warmth of his lantern a small glowing bubble of comfort in the dark. He made his way to the sluice gate, a simple but essential tool that regulated the flow of water to the great wheel. It was a heavy wooden lever, its surface worn smooth and polished by the countless hands that had worked it over the years. The wood, cool to the touch, felt solid and strong under his palm. He placed his hands on the lever and pushed it slowly, a deliberate, unhurried motion. The lever, which had been still for so long, moved with a low groaning protest, the sound of ancient timber yielding to its purpose. The sound was a deep, rhythmic grind, and he felt the immense weight of the water pushing against it. With each slow inch that the sluice gate rose, he felt a deeper, stronger current begin to flow. As the gate opened, the sound of the babbling brook, which had been a low, constant murmur, deepened. It became a steady, rhythmic rush, a powerful, purposeful torrent of liquid life. The sound was loud, but not jarring, a deep, resonant hum that spoke of the immense power of the flowing water. The air around him filled with a cool, fine mist that rose from the rushing water, a refreshing, damp kiss on his skin. He stood for a moment, simply letting the mist settle on his face, a feeling of deep peace settling in his heart. He moved back toward the great water wheel, his lantern casting a shifting, dancing glow on the wet, dark wood. The wheel, which had been turning with a gentle, patient rhythm, now turned with a stronger, more powerful purpose. The low, contented creak of the axle was now more pronounced, a steady, rhythmic complaint that spoke of its renewed strength. The swish and splash of the water, hitting the wooden blades with a newfound force, was a deeper, more resonant sound, a powerful, ceaseless song that filled the night. The sounds of the landscape, which had been a chorus of evening birds and crickets, now began to fade. The birds, sensing the deepening night, fell silent, their final quiet chirps a last farewell to the day. The crickets, though still singing, were now a soft, distant hum, their voices lost in the powerful, rhythmic song of the water and the wheel. The mill was now wrapped in its own private world of sound, a constant, peaceful melody that was a perfect lullaby for the sleeping village. Henrik stood for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the turning wheel. He watched as it dipped into the water, a great, dark circle slicing through the luminous surface of the brook. The water, a ribbon of pure, liquid silver, seemed to flow with a newfound purpose, and the droplets that fell from the turning wheel were a perfect cascade of light. He felt a deep, quiet satisfaction in the work of his hands. He had given the wheel more life, more strength, more purpose for the night ahead. He took a slow, deep breath, his lungs filling with the cool, moist air, rich with the scent of water and wood. The sound of the new rhythm, the deep, constant rush of the water, and the powerful creak of the wheel was a perfect, peaceful song. He listened, his heart full, and he knew that the mill was ready. The night's work could now begin. The air inside the mill was now a quiet, living presence, thick with the scent of fresh grain and the soft, constant creak and swish of the water wheel. The only light came from Old Henrik's lantern, its warm, honeyed glow painting the rough-hewn walls and floor in a gentle light that made the shadows feel soft and welcoming. A low, rhythmic murmur, the sound of the millstones beginning their patient work, now filled the space, a deep, resonant hum that was a quiet song of labor. Old Henrik stood beside the great millstones, his gaze fixed on the heart of the mill's work. The two great, round, immovable giants, carved from hard gray granite, were now turning slowly and with a steady, unhurried grace. The top stone, its weight immense and powerful, spun with a deliberate, low-groan, a soft, ancient protest as it began its endless journey. The sound was a deep, rhythmic grind, 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 quiet, powerful echo that filled the mill, a sound that spoke of strength and patience and purpose. He moved closer, his hands resting on the smooth, worn wood of the mill's inner frame. He watched as the first grain, 1,000 tiny golden seeds, disappeared into the small opening in the center of the top stone. They were swallowed by the great, unmoving heart of the mill, and the sound of their transformation was a soft, gentle scrunch that was a subtle counterpoint to the deep, steady grind of the stones. It was a sound of quiet, beautiful alchemy, the sound of the earth's gifts being changed into sustenance. After a long, patient moment, it began. From between the two great stones, from a small, dark opening at their base, the first flower began to emerge. It was a slow, quiet river of white, a fine, pale powder that drifted down into the wooden trough like soft, silent snow. It fell in gentle sheets, a continuous, quiet cascade of light that settled in the trough in a soft, luminous pile. The sight was one of profound, simple beauty, a testament to the patient work of the mill. Henrik knelt, his knees finding the cool, hard floor, and he reached out a hand. He let his fingertips brush the falling flower, and the sensation was one of pure, unblemished softness. It was a powder of impossible fineness, a cool, silky texture that felt like velvet on his skin. It was light as air, and it settled on his fingertips in a fine, weightless film. The scent that rose from it was a clean, earthy aroma, a gentle perfume of sun and soil, of the quiet fields and the patient work of the harvest. It was a fragrance that was both familiar and new, a smell of nourishment and life. He lowered his hand and let the falling flower land on the back of it, a fine, white dusting that looked like a quiet layer of winter snow. He watched as the pale, ethereal dust settled on the wood of the trough, and he reached out to run his hand over the surface. The flower was so fine, it left no trace of its presence, but for the soft, gentle color, a pale shadow on the dark wood. It was a texture of pure smoothness, a feeling of peaceful perfection. He knelt there for a long moment, the quiet, rhythmic sounds of the mill a perfect lullaby. The low grind, grind, grind of the stones and the constant swish, swish, swish of the waterwheel were a perfect, peaceful song that spoke of a night of steady, purposeful work. The air, thick with the scent of the flower, was a comforting presence, a rich, nourishing perfume that made the mill feel like a place of sacred refuge. He reached into the trough and with a slow, careful motion, gathered a small handful of the fresh, warm flower. He held it in his palm, a soft, white mound that was the culmination of so much work. He felt its incredible fineness against his skin, its soft, light weight, and a deep sense of gratitude settled in his heart. It was a simple gift, but a precious one, a symbol of life and peace, and a night of quiet, beautiful work. The grinding of the millstones was a deep, constant hum now, a soft, powerful presence that filled the mill's interior with the promise of flower. The scent of the freshly milled grain, a warm and earthy perfume, mingled with the lingering sweetness of the air. Old Henrik, his work in a steady, rhythmic flow, felt a gentle weariness settle in his bones. It was the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from a day and a night of honest, quiet labor. He moved to the hearth, where a small fire of kindling and peat still glowed, casting a warm orange light into the room. From a small cupboard, he took a simple clay mug, its surface smooth and cool to the touch. He filled it from a small iron pot that rested near the fire's edge, its contents a simple, nourishing brew of warm ale. The liquid, a deep, golden brown, released a faint, sweet aroma of barley and hops, a clean, wholesome fragrance that promised a quiet comfort. He held the cup in his strong, weathered hands, feeling the warmth of it seep into his palms, a gentle, soothing heat it chased away the night's chill. He moved to the great door and unlatched it, the sound a soft, grinding protest from the ancient iron. He stepped outside, the cool evening air, fresh with the scent of river water and damp earth, a cool, gentle kiss on his face. The sky, which had been a perfect star-strewn canvas of deep black, was now beginning to show the first blush of a new twilight. The faintest hints of rose and pale purple were beginning to appear along the horizon, a soft, silent promise of the coming dawn. He leaned against the rough-hewn timbers of the mill wall, the wood cool and solid against his back. He took a slow, deep sip of the warm ale, the liquid a comforting, earthy presence on his tongue. He let the taste linger for a moment, savoring its simple, clean flavor. The warmth of the cup in his hands was a small, perfect comfort in the immense stillness of the night. He closed his eyes for a moment, simply listening. The soft, rhythmic murmur of the brook was a constant, peaceful song, and the distant hum of the millstones was a reassuring presence behind him. He opened his eyes and gazed at the sky. The moon, his quiet companion, was now sinking low on the horizon, its light now a pale, gentle silver. The first blush of rose and purple was deepening, spreading across the sky in soft, quiet waves of color. He watched as the stars, one by one, began to fade, their brilliant white light now a subtle, distant shimmer. A gentle wind, a barely there sigh, moved through the trees, causing the leaves to whisper a soft, hushed secret to one another. He could hear the soft clink of a single loose pebble in the brook, a tiny, perfect sound in the immense stillness. He took another slow sip of his ale, the warmth of the cup a perfect counterpoint to the coolness of the night. He felt a profound sense of gratitude for this moment, for the quiet of the night, for the peaceful rhythm of his work, for the simple, wholesome nourishment of his drink. He was a man who understood the rhythm of the world, and he knew that this quiet, solitary moment was a sacred part of it. He was a guardian of a peaceful, ancient order, a keeper of a quiet, steady rhythm in the heart of the village. He stood for a long moment, simply watching the quiet spectacle of the coming dawn. The colors of the sky, a soft and perfect painting of rose and violet, grew deeper, and the air, though still cool, held a new, hopeful light. He finished his drink, the warm, comforting liquid now a part of him, and he lowered the empty cup. Then, with a quiet sense of contentment, he turned and with a soft thump of the latch, returned to the mill, the warm glow of his lantern a beacon in the still, coming dawn. His work, his long, peaceful night of labor, now continued, blessed by the quiet grace of the world. The door of the mill closed with a soft, final thump, and Old Henrik was once more wrapped in the warm, familiar quiet of his home. The sounds of the outside world, the gentle murmur of the brook, and the deep, constant hum of the waterwheel were now a low, soothing presence, a distant lullaby for the sleeping village. The only light inside came from his lantern, its warm, honeyed glow casting long, soft shadows on the rough-hewn wooden walls and floor. The air, rich with the sweet, earthy perfume of flower dust, was a comforting presence, a familiar scent of sustenance and peace. He moved slowly, his steps unhurried, as he made his way to a corner of the mill where a simple broom rested against the wall. It was a humble tool, made of stout, gnarled wood and bound straw, its bristles a perfect, stiff cluster of dried stalks. The straw felt brittle and rough in his strong hands, a small reminder of the patient work of the fields. He reached for a small, shallow basket that sat on the floor, its surface woven from thin, pliable reeds. The basket felt light and smooth to the touch, and it smelled faintly of the damp earth from which it had grown. He knelt, his knees finding the cool, hard floor, and he began his work. With slow, gentle motions, he began to sweep the stray husks and the fine, white film of flower dust that had settled on the wooden floor. The sound was a soft, rhythmic swish, 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 the gentle scratching of the straw against the rough-hewn timber. A fine, white cloud of dust rose in the lantern light, a soft, ethereal mist that danced and swirled in the warm glow before settling back to the floor. The dust was so fine, it felt like velvet under his fingertips, and it smelled of the earth, of the sun, and of the quiet, patient labor of the field. His movements were a kind of quiet meditation, a peaceful, rhythmic ritual that was the culmination of his night's work. He swept the stray husks, the empty shells of the grain, into the basket. The husks were dry and papery, and they made a soft, rattling sound as they gathered together. The sound was a low, gentle whisper, a sound that spoke of the patient transformation of the grain. He then swept the dust, a perfect white powder, his hands moving with a graceful, unhurried ease. The fine dust was light as air, and it settled in the basket in a soft, luminous pile. He moved along the floorboards, their surface worn smooth by countless years of footsteps. He felt a soft, low creak beneath his feet, a gentle sound of protest from the ancient wood that was a familiar presence in the mill. The light from his lantern, which he had placed on the floor beside him, cast a warm, shifting glow on the wooden beams and walls, making the shadows feel soft and welcoming. He was a guardian of this quiet, sacred space, a man whose work was to bring order and peace to the chaos of the harvest. After a long while, his basket was full, and the floor was clean. He sat back on his heels, his hands resting on his knees, and he looked at his work. The husks and dust, which had been scattered across the floor, were now neatly contained in the basket, a tangible sign of his quiet labor. He took a slow, deep breath, his lungs filling with the rich, comforting scent of the flower dust. It was a perfume of peace, a fragrance of sustenance, and it settled deep within him, a feeling of profound contentment. He stood, his movements slow and deliberate, and moved to the great door. He opened it just a crack, the cool night air, a gentle kiss on his face. The sound of the waterwheel, its low, constant creak and swish, was a perfect, peaceful song that filled the air. He listened to the gentle murmur of the brook, its ceaseless flow a constant, reassuring presence in the night. The mill was at rest now, and so was he. His work, his peaceful nocturnal labor, was complete. He stood for a long moment, simply listening to the quiet, beautiful sounds of the night, his heart full. The grinding of the millstones was a deep, constant hum now, a soft, powerful presence that filled the mill's interior with the promise of flour. The scent of the freshly milled grain, a warm and earthy perfume, mingled with the lingering sweetness of the air. Old Henrik, his work in a steady, rhythmic flow, felt a gentle contentment settle in his bones. It was the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from a long, peaceful night of honest labor. A new sound, a gentle interruption to the mill's rhythm, reached his ears. It was the soft thump, thump of quiet footsteps on the packed-down earth outside, a familiar cadence in the still of the night. It was not the hurried step of a traveler, but the slow, patient tread of a villager. He moved to the mill's great door, its iron latch cool to the touch, and he unbarred it with a soft, grinding sound. A woman, her name was Alara, stood before him. She was a gentle soul, her face kind and wise, and she held a small basket in her hands. From it, a warm, heavenly fragrance rose to meet him, the unmistakable scent of freshly baked bread. It was a perfume of warmth and home, a sweet, yeasty aroma that spoke of nourishment and comfort. In the other hand, she held a small bundle of fresh herbs, their scents a cool, clean counterpoint to the bread's warmth. He could smell the earthy, pungent aroma of sage and the sweet, clean scent of lavender. "Master Henrik," she whispered, her voice low and respectful in the silent night. "A small gift for your long, patient work, in thanks for the flower." "Elara," he replied, his voice a low, warm hum. "This is too kind. You honor me." She offered him the basket, and he took it in his strong, weathered hands. The bread, wrapped in a simple cloth, was still warm to the touch, a gentle heat that seeped into his palms. The texture of the cloth was a rough, comforting weave, and the weight of the bread was a solid, tangible gift. "It is from the first loaves of the day," she murmured, a soft smile on her lips. "Baked from the flour you ground for us just yesterday." He felt a deep sense of gratitude settle in his heart. It was a simple exchange, but a profound one. A quiet, living connection between his work and the nourishment of the village. She then offered him the bundle of herbs, and he took them. The sage leaves were soft and velvety to the touch, and the lavender blossoms were dry and papery. The scents of the two herbs, so different and yet so beautiful together, were a final, peaceful gift. "And a blessing for your home, Master Henrik," she whispered. "May they bring peace and good health to you." He bowed his head, a silent gesture of profound thanks. "And to you, Elara, and your family, may your home be filled with peace and health always." She smiled, a quiet, gentle expression of warmth, and then, with a soft swish, swish of her robes, she turned and began to walk away, her footsteps a soft, receding sound on the path. Henrik stood in the doorway, his hands holding the gifts, and watched as she became a soft, dark silhouette in the moonlight. He felt a deep sense of connection, a quiet understanding that his work was not just a chore, but a living part of the community, a quiet, essential rhythm that fed the very heart of the village. He moved back inside the mill, the scent of the fresh bread and the cool, clean aroma of the herbs now mingling with the familiar scent of the flour. He set the basket on a clean wooden table, his hands resting on the smooth, warm wood. The sounds of the mill, the low grind of the stones, and the soft swish of the water were a constant, peaceful presence. He stood for a long moment, simply listening to the quiet, beautiful sounds of the night, his heart full. He was a miller, yes, but more than that, he was a guardian of a quiet, essential rhythm, a keeper of the heart of his community. The mill was now wrapped in a perfect, nocturnal peace, a hush that had settled over the village and the quiet fields. The moon, a patient silver coin, hung high in the velvet sky, its light a soft, luminous presence that bathed the mill and the brook in a gentle glow. The only sound was the mill's own gentle song, the low, constant creak and splash of the waterwheel, a rhythmic lullaby that filled the cool night air. Inside, the sound of the grinding millstones was a soft, deep hum, a reassuring presence that spoke of quiet, purposeful labor. Old Henrik, his work in a steady, rhythmic flow, sat on a low wooden stool beside the mill's great stone wall. His work was methodical, a quiet ritual of care and preparation. In his strong, weathered hands, he held a small, finely wrought blade, a simple tool that was an extension of his own patient work. Its handle was made of smooth, polished oak, and the blade itself was dark and strong. In his other hand, he held a small, flat whetstone, its surface worn smooth and perfect from a lifetime of use. The stone felt cool and solid, a tangible connection to the earth from which it came. He began his work, his hands moving with a deep, quiet knowledge. He ran the blade over the whetstone, a slow, steady stroke. The sound was a soft, rhythmic she-dash, a gentle rasp of metal against stone that was a quiet, living thing in the stillness. It was a sound of quiet perfection, a sound that spoke of a tool being made ready for its purpose. A faint, earthy scent of whetstone, of wet clay and fine dust rose to meet him, a clean, wholesome perfume that mingled with the sweet, familiar aroma of flower and the cool, damp scent of the river. He worked with a quiet concentration, his gaze fixed on the blade. The warm light from his lantern, which he had placed on the floor beside him, caught on the edge of the blade, and he watched for the small, bright reflection, the single perfect line of light that signaled the keen edge. As he worked, a fine gray powder, a soft, ethereal dust of steel and stone, settled on his hands and on the surface of the whetstone. He ran a finger over the fine powder, feeling its smooth, cool texture, a subtle grit that was the very essence of his patient work. The only sounds were the soft, constant rhythm of his sharpening, the gentle she that filled the mill. In the background, the low, contented creak and swish of the waterwheel was a perfect, peaceful song. The distant murmur of the brook was a constant, lulling presence, a low, hypnotic whisper that seemed to speak of a deep and ancient peace. He felt a deep sense of stillness settle within him, a quiet calm that came from a lifetime of this kind of work, this kind of quiet, patient labor. After a long while, the work was done. He ran his thumb carefully over the edge of the blade, and a small, fine line of hair stood up. The blade was sharp and ready. He set it on a small, clean cloth, its surface a pristine white in the lantern light. He then ran his hands over the whetstone, feeling its smooth, cool surface, a perfect, quiet object that had done its work without a sound of complaint. He sat for a long moment, his hands resting in his lap, simply listening to the quiet harmony of his surroundings. The cool night air, the warm glow of the lantern, the soft, rhythmic sounds of the water and the wheel, the lingering sense of steel and stone and flour, all of it was a perfect, peaceful blend. He took a slow, deep breath, his lungs filling with the clean, wholesome air, and a profound sense of gratitude settled in his heart. The night, his mill, his work, all of it, was a quiet, sacred refuge, a place of peace and purpose. He closed his eyes, his head bowed, and simply listened to the sound of the world breathing around him. The moon, now a patient silver companion, hung high in the velvet sky, its light a soft, luminous presence that bathed the mill and the brook in a gentle glow. The only sound was the mill's own gentle song, the low, constant creak and splash of the waterwheel, a rhythmic lullaby that filled the cool night air. Inside, the sound of the grinding millstones was a soft, deep hum, a reassuring presence that spoke of quiet, purposeful labor. A new, soft movement now joined the still air inside the mill. A few moths, their forms a soft, fluttering shadow, had found their way inside, drawn by the warm, beckoning glow of Old Henrik's lanterns. They circled the light, their movements a gentle, hypnotic dance. He watched them for a long moment, their dusty wings a soft, blurred presence against the light. Their silent, ceaseless flutter was a subtle, living counterpoint to the deep, steady rhythm of the mill. He sat on his low wooden stool, his hands resting in his lap, and simply watched the quiet ballet. The shadows, which had been long and dark, now grew softer, a deep, gentle gray that wrapped the room in a quiet embrace. The air, rich with the sweet, earthy perfume of flower dust, was a comforting presence, a familiar scent of sustenance and peace. The sounds of the outside world, the distant call of an owl, the soft chirp of a cricket, were a gentle, lulling presence, a low, quiet harmony that was a perfect backdrop to his thoughts. He began to murmur, his voice a low, breathy hum that was barely a sound at all. It was not a conversation with another, but a quiet, rhythmic conversation with himself, with the mill, and with the night. "The wheel turns for all," he whispered, the words a soft, ancient echo in the quiet space. He thought of the village, of the farmers who had brought him their grain, of the families who would eat the bread. The mill, he knew, was the heart of the village, a quiet, essential rhythm that fed them all. The wheel, with its patient, ceaseless turning, was a symbol of that truth. He looked at his hands, strong and weathered, and he felt the weight of a lifetime of work in them. He thought of the saying his grandfather had taught him, a simple, old truth. The water knows its way to the sea, and a good man knows his way to his work. He felt the truth of those words deep within him. His work, he knew, was not just a job, but a calling. It was a purpose that gave his life a steady, unhurried rhythm, a quiet grace that was a deep and constant comfort. He was a keeper of the wheel, a guardian of the grind, a man whose life was intertwined with the quiet, ceaseless flow of the water. He reached out and ran a hand over the rough-hewn surface of a wooden post, feeling the cool, familiar texture of the wood. The post, which had stood in the same place for generations, felt solid and unyielding, a testament to the patient endurance of the mill. He thought of the sayings his mother had taught him, simple truths that spoke of the good life. A full hand and a quiet heart, she would say. He felt a deep sense of contentment settle within him, a quiet, profound happiness that came from a simple life of honest, purposeful labor. His hands, though they were strong and worn, were filled with the quiet grace of his work, and his heart, though it had known its share of sorrow, was now quiet and at peace. He sat for a long moment, simply listening to the quiet harmony of his surroundings. The gentle flutter of the moths, the low grind of the millstones, the constant creak and splash of the waterwheel, all of it was a perfect, peaceful blend. He closed his eyes, his head bowed, and simply listened to the sound of the world breathing around him. He felt the cool air on his face, the faint, comforting scent of flower dust in his nose, and he felt a deep sense of stillness and purpose. He was a small part of a great, quiet rhythm, and his heart was full. The mill was a sanctuary of peace now, a warm and living place wrapped in the cool embrace of the night. The moon, a patient silver companion, was rising higher, its light now a powerful, luminous presence that streamed through the narrow, dusty windows of the mill. The light, a perfect liquid silver, fell in long slanted beams, illuminating the fine dust motes that danced in the air, a slow, gentle ballet of flower and light. The air was rich with the sweet, earthy perfume of the grinding grain, a warm and nourishing scent that was the very essence of comfort. Old Henrik moved through this peaceful world, his steps unhurried, his movements a gentle, rhythmic part of the mill's quiet life. He made his way to the great wooden hopper, its broad, open mouth a silent, waiting presence. From a stack nearby, he took up a burlap sack filled with grain, its weight a familiar comfort in his hands. He felt the coarse texture of the burlap against his skin, a rough, comforting weave that spoke of the patient work of the fields. He lifted the sack, and the grains, 1,000 tiny, hard seeds, shifted inside with a soft, dry rustle, a sound of quiet, contained energy. He brought the sack to the hopper, and with a soft grunt of effort, began to pour. The grain, a river of gold in the luminous moonlight, flowed into the hopper with a gentle hiss, a soft, dry sound that was a counterpoint to the deep, steady grind of the millstones. He watched the grain flow, a silent, patient river, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the earth's quiet, powerful gifts. He moved to another sack, his hands finding the same rough, comforting texture. He hefted it, feeling its full, honest weight, and brought it to the hopper. The sound of the grain pouring was a soft, continuous whoosh, a gentle rain of sustenance. The millstones, their great, unmoving forms now turning in a steady, rhythmic purpose, were singing a low, deep song, a constant thud, thud, thud that was a comforting presence in the mill. The sound was so low, so deep, that he could feel its vibrations through the thick wooden floorboards, a quiet, reassuring hum that resonated in his very bones. He moved about the mill, checking the flow of the grain, his gaze moving from the hopper to the fine, white flour that was now beginning to spill from the millstones. The flour, a soft, pale powder, fell into the wooden trough like quiet snow, its texture a perfect, unblemished softness. The scent of it was a gentle, earthy perfume, a clean, wholesome aroma that was the very essence of nourishment. The moonlight, a perfect liquid silver, now streamed through the mill's dusty windows, illuminating everything in its path. He could see the fine dust motes, a million tiny dancing points of light suspended in the air. He could see the soft, velvety texture of the flour dust on the floor and the subtle, shifting shadows that danced on the rough-hewn walls. The mill, bathed in this quiet, sacred light, felt like a living thing, a warm and peaceful sanctuary. He stood for a long moment, his hands resting on a cool wooden post. He closed his eyes, his head bowed, and he felt the rhythm of the night in the mill, a perfect, quiet symphony of sound and sensation. He felt the cool, moist air on his skin, the gentle thud of the millstones through the floor, the soft whoosh of the grain, and the rhythmic creak and splash of the waterwheel. He was fully attuned to its every quiet movement, a guardian of its peaceful nocturnal life. He was home, and all was well. The air inside the mill was now a quiet, living presence, thick with the scent of fresh grain and the soft, constant creak and swish of the waterwheel. The moon, a patient silver coin, hung high in the velvet sky, its light a soft, luminous presence that streamed through the narrow, dusty windows of the mill. A low, rhythmic murmur, the sound of the millstones beginning their patient work, now filled the space, a deep, resonant hum that was a quiet song of labor. Old Henrik moved to the great wooden gears, a complex and beautiful collection of cogs and teeth that were the very heart of the mill's inner workings. They were made of thick, strong oak, their surfaces dark and polished from a lifetime of turning. He knelt, his knees finding the cool, hard floor, and he brought his lantern closer, its warm, honeyed glow casting a soft light on the aged timber. He reached out a hand, his fingers strong and weathered, and he ran them over the teeth of a great wooden cog. The wood was so smooth and perfect, worn by countless turns, that it felt like polished stone. He could feel the fine, subtle grooves and ridges, the quiet history of 100,000 grinds. He ran his hand over the worn surface, and he felt a deep, quiet sense of connection to the past. He remembered, so clearly, the feel of his grandfather's hand on his own, guiding his fingers over these very same gears. The wood remembers, his grandfather had whispered, his voice a low, knowing rumble. It holds the story of every turn, every grain, every hand that has worked it. Henrik had been a boy then, small and eager, his mind filled with the wonder of the mill's great, powerful magic. He remembered the faint scent of old timber, a deep, earthy perfume that was the mill's own unique fragrance. He remembered the feel of the wood under his small, uncalloused hands, its surface rough and unfamiliar. But his grandfather's hands, so strong and gentle, had shown him the truth of the mill's work, that it was not just a chore, but a living, breathing history. He sat back on his heels, his hands still resting on the gear. The sounds of the mill, the low, contented creak of the axle, the deep, rhythmic grind of the millstones were a constant, peaceful presence. He felt the subtle thrum of the gears as they turned, a quiet vibration that passed from the wood to his hands, a living pulse that was the very heartbeat of the mill. It was a rhythm that had been in his family for generations, a quiet, peaceful song that had been passed from father to son, from grandfather to grandson. He ran his hand over the gear again, feeling the subtle, quiet imperfections, the small nicks and scratches that were a part of its long history. Each one, he knew, was a story. A time when a stone had been too hard, or the wheel had turned too fast, or a hand had been less than perfect. He felt a deep, profound sense of gratitude for the lessons he had learned here, for the patient wisdom that had been passed down to him. The mill, he knew, was more than just a building. It was a living monument to the patient work of the hands that had built it and tended it. He thought of his grandfather's words. "The mill is a good teacher," he had said. "It teaches you patience, and it teaches you that all things, when worked with care and purpose, will eventually become fine." Henrik had carried those words with him for a lifetime, a quiet, guiding truth in his heart. The mill had taught him to be steady, to be patient, to be kind. It had taught him that the best work was a long, slow, unhurried journey. He stayed for a long moment, simply listening to the quiet harmony of his surroundings. The gentle flutter of a moth, the low grind of the millstones, the constant creak and splash of the waterwheel, all of it was a perfect, peaceful blend. The air, thick with the scent of old timber and flower dust, was a comforting presence, a familiar perfume that promised a night of quiet, peaceful labor. He slowly straightened, the old joints in his knees a soft, low creak of their own. He took a slow, deep breath, his lungs filling with the rich, wholesome air, and he let his gaze return to the softly turning waterwheel, his heart full. The final vestiges of twilight had vanished, a last whisper of purple and rose fading into the deep, quiet expanse of the night. The moon, a perfect, luminous coin, now hung high and alone in the vast, star-strewn sky. Its light, a pure, liquid silver, fell over the world, bathing the mill and the surrounding countryside in a serene and otherworldly glow. The sounds of the day had vanished, and the only song was the gentle, ceaseless murmur of the brook and the low, contented hum of the mill. Old Henrik, feeling a quiet need for a moment of stillness, moved to the mill's great door. He unlatched it, the sound a soft, grinding protest from the ancient iron, and stepped outside. The air, which had been cool just an hour before, was now a deep, refreshing cold, a pure, damp kiss on his face. The scent of the night of damp earth and wet stone, of river moss, and the sweet, clean perfume of wild mint filled his lungs with a cool, peaceful breath. He stood for a long moment, simply letting the stillness of the night settle around him, a feeling of deep peace in his heart. He moved to the small wooden platform that jutted out over the brook, his hands resting on the cool, warm wood of the railing. His gaze went to the great waterwheel. It was turning with a steady, unhurried grace, a great, dark circle of ancient wood and forged iron. The moonlight, a perfect, liquid silver, caught on its surface, and the wheel seemed to shimmer and glow with a quiet inner light. The water, a dark, shadowy ribbon in the twilight, was now alive with 1,000 points of light. The moon's reflection, a perfect shimmering twin, was a soft and beautiful presence on its surface. He watched as the water, as it flowed over the wheel, became a living, breathing thing. The droplets that fell from the turning wheel were like a cascade of tiny, falling jewels, each one a luminous point of silver light. They hit the water below with a soft, gentle plink, 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 a sound of quiet magic that was a subtle counterpoint to the low, rhythmic creak of the wheel. The water, as it flowed under the bridge, was now a ribbon of pure, liquid silver, a soft, luminous presence that seemed to have a life of its own. The moonlight, filtering through the trees, cast long, shifting shadows over the mill walls, a delicate, lace-like pattern of dark and light. He could see the rough-hewn timbers and the smooth, gray stone, each surface now bathed in a soft, silvery glow. The mill, which had seemed so solid and immovable in the light of day, now looked like a thing of quiet, delicate magic, a place of peace and purpose. He ran a hand over the rough-hewn stone of the mill wall, feeling its cool, unyielding surface, a tangible connection to the earth and the work he loved. The sound of the night was a quiet, perfect symphony. The soft, rhythmic creak of the wheel, the constant swish of the water, and the distant, lulling hum of the millstones inside were a perfect blend of sound and sensation. He felt a deep, profound sense of gratitude for this moment, for the quiet, solitary peace that was his work. He was a small part of a great, quiet rhythm, and his life, he knew, was a gentle, unhurried song in the heart of the village. He stood for a long moment, simply listening to the quiet harmony of his surroundings. The cool night air, the warm glow of the lantern inside, the luminous light of the moon, and the rhythmic song of the water, all of it was a perfect, peaceful blend. He took a slow, deep breath, his lungs filling with the clean, wholesome air, and he felt fully attuned to the quiet rhythm of the mill and the night. All was well. The moon, now a patient silver coin, hung high in the velvet sky, its light a soft, luminous presence that streamed through the narrow, dusty windows of the mill. Inside, the sound of the grinding millstones was a soft, deep hum, a reassuring presence that spoke of quiet, purposeful labor. The air was rich with the sweet, earthy perfume of the grinding grain, a warm and nourishing scent that was the very essence of comfort. Old Henrik moved to the great wooden trough that rested beneath the millstones, its surface worn smooth by countless years of flour and grain. He reached for a simple, hand-woven sieve, its fine mesh stretched taut over a wooden frame. He held it in his strong, weathered hands, and with a gentle, patient motion, began to scoop the freshly ground flour from the trough. The flour, a soft, warm powder, felt like velvet to the touch, a cool, silky texture that was a promise of nourishment. He lifted the sieve and held it over a clean, empty linen sack. The sack, a soft, creamy white, was made of finely woven linen, and its surface was cool and smooth to the touch. He began to sift, his hands moving with a slow, rhythmic motion, a soft, gentle shush, shush, shush that was a peaceful sound in the quiet mill. The flour, a fine, white powder, fell through the sieve in a soft, ethereal cloud, a gentle cascade of light that drifted down into the sack like pale snow. It fell in gentle sheets, a continuous, quiet cascade of light that settled in the sack in a soft, luminous pile. The sight was one of profound, simple beauty, a testament to the patient work of the mill. The fine dust motes, a million tiny, dancing points of light suspended in the air, caught the warm, honeyed glow of his lantern, creating a soft, ethereal ballet of light and shadow. He worked on, his movements a quiet, rhythmic meditation. He held the sieve, its mesh a gentle barrier between his hand and the fine flour, and he felt the cool, silky powder flow over his fingers. He ran his hand over the surface of the linen sack, feeling the soft, smooth weave, and he listened to the low, rhythmic rustle as the sack filled with its precious contents. The sounds of the mill, the low, contented creak of the waterwheel, the deep, rhythmic grind of the millstones, were a constant, peaceful presence, a perfect lullaby for the sleeping world. He worked on, his heart filled with a quiet sense of purpose. Each scoop, each sift, each slow, patient movement was a part of a greater, quieter rhythm, a rhythm that had been in his family for generations. He was a keeper of a sacred trust, a guardian of the grain, a man whose work was to bring the earth's gifts to the people. He felt a deep, profound sense of gratitude for the lessons he had learned here, for the patient wisdom that had been passed down to him. The mill had taught him to be steady, to be patient, to be kind. It had taught him that the best work was a long, slow, unhurried journey. When the sack was full, he tied its mouth with a simple knot, his hands moving with a practiced ease. The sack was now a soft, round shape, its weight a solid, tangible comfort in his hands. He set it down, its base a soft, muffled thump on the cool wooden floor, and he reached for another clean linen sack. He began the process again, the quiet, rhythmic shush, shush, shush of the sifting a peaceful song. After a long while, the work was done. He stood back, his hands resting on his knees, and he looked at the neat, quiet stack of sacks. They were a beautiful, luminous presence in the warm glow of his lantern, a tangible sign of his quiet labor. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction settle in his heart, a quiet, profound happiness that came from a simple life of honest, purposeful labor. The mill was at peace, and so was he. His work was a quiet, sacred refuge, a place of peace and purpose. He was home, and all was well. The air inside the mill was now a quiet, living presence, thick with the scent of fresh grain and the soft, constant creak and swish of the waterwheel. The moon, a patient silver coin, hung high in the velvet sky, its light a soft, luminous presence that streamed through the narrow, dusty windows of the mill. The air was rich with the sweet, earthy perfume of the grinding grain, a warm and nourishing scent that was the very essence of comfort. Old Henrik, his work in a steady, rhythmic flow, felt a gentle weariness settle in his bones. It was the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from a long, peaceful night of honest labor. He moved to a small, narrow window, its frame made of thick, rough-hewn oak. He unlatched the wooden shutter, the sound a soft, grinding protest from the ancient iron, and pushed it outward with a gentle thump. As the shutter opened, the cool night air, fresh with the scent of river water and damp earth, rushed in. It was a gentle, loving breath from the outside world, a cool kiss on the skin. The air inside the mill, which had been warm and heavy, began to stir, carrying the sweet scent of flour and linseed oil on its new currents. The sound of the babbling brook, which had been a low murmur inside the mill, now grew louder, a steady, hypnotic whisper that filled the space. He leaned on the window ledge, his hands resting on the cool, warm wood. His posture was relaxed, his shoulders finally released from the long night's labor. He simply stood there, listening to the quiet, gentle sounds of the night. The brook's gentle whisper was a constant, peaceful song, a sound that spoke of a deep and ancient peace. The crickets, which had been a low hum, were now a constant, rhythmic chirp, 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 a tiny, living music that was a perfect counterpoint to the deep, steady rhythm of the mill. He closed his eyes for a moment, simply letting the stillness of the night settle around him. He could feel the cool air on his face, a gentle kiss from the night, and he could hear the soft rustle of the leaves on the trees that grew along the riverbank, a soft hushed secret that was a part of the night's quiet magic. The sounds of the mill, the low, contented creak of the waterwheel, and the deep, rhythmic grind of the millstones were a constant, peaceful presence, a perfect lullaby for the sleeping world. He felt a profound sense of connection to the quiet countryside around him, a feeling that he was a part of this great, beautiful rhythm. He was a man who understood the rhythm of the world. He knew the sun brought the light, the rain brought the water, and the wind brought the cool. But the night brought the peace. It brought a quiet, perfect beauty to the things he loved most. He was a keeper of the wheel, a guardian of the grind, a man whose life was a gentle, unhurried song in the heart of the village. He felt a deep, profound sense of gratitude for this time, for this quiet, solitary moment of peace. After a long while, he opened his eyes, his gaze fixed on the moon, a patient silver coin hanging in the deep velvet sky. He took a slow, deep breath, his lungs filling with the clean, wholesome air, and he felt fully attuned to the quiet rhythm of the mill and the night. He was home, and all was well. Then, with a quiet sense of contentment, he turned slowly back toward his work, carrying the tranquility of the outside world into the mill with him, ready for the long, peaceful night ahead. The night was now a quiet, living presence, a deep, velvet cloak that had settled over the quiet fields and the sleeping village. The moon, a patient silver coin, hung high in the velvet sky, its light a soft, luminous presence that streamed through the narrow, dusty windows of the mill. Inside, the sound of the grinding millstones was a soft, deep hum, a reassuring presence that spoke of quiet, purposeful labor. The air was rich with the sweet, earthy perfume of the grinding grain, a warm and nourishing scent that was the very essence of comfort. Old Henrik, his work in a steady, rhythmic flow, moved slowly through this peaceful world. He made his way to the great wooden gears and supports, the very heart of the mill's inner workings. They were a complex and beautiful collection of cogs and teeth, a masterpiece of quiet, patient craftsmanship. The wood, dark and polished from a lifetime of turning, was imbued with a quiet history. He held his lantern close, its warm, honeyed glow painting the rough-hewn walls and the great wooden beams in a gentle light that made the shadows feel soft and welcoming. He knelt, his knees finding the cool, hard floor, and he reached out a hand. He ran his fingers over the surface of a great wooden support beam. The wood was so old, so ancient, that its grain was now a raised, intricate pattern of ridges and valleys. He could feel the tiny knots and the perfect lines of the grain, each one a silent story of a tree that had grown tall and strong in a sun that had long since set. He ran his hand over the surface, feeling the cool, firm texture of the wood, and he felt a deep, quiet sense of connection to the men who had shaped this timber so many generations ago. The scent of old timber, a deep, earthy perfume, was a constant, quiet presence, a fragrance that was a part of the mill's very soul. It was a smell of patience and endurance, a warm, comforting aroma that spoke of a quiet, steady rhythm. He moved his hand, his fingers following the curve of a wooden support, and he could feel the subtle creak and groan of the old timber as it held the weight of the mill. It was a sound of quiet protest, a low, contented whisper that spoke of its patient labor. He moved to the great wooden gears, a complex and beautiful collection of cogs and teeth. He ran his fingers over the smooth, worn surface of a great cog, feeling its perfect, rounded shape. He looked at the tiny, intricate patterns of the wood, the soft, swirling knots that were illuminated by his lantern's warm glow. Each one was a unique, quiet masterpiece, a testament to the patient work of a man who had known that his work would last for generations. He felt a deep, profound sense of reverence for the men who had come before him, for their quiet knowledge and their steady hands. He stayed for a long moment, simply listening to the quiet harmony of his surroundings. The gentle flutter of a moth, the low grind of the millstones, the constant creak and splash of the waterwheel. All of it was a perfect, peaceful blend. The air, thick with the scent of old timber and flower dust, was a comforting presence, a familiar perfume that promised a night of quiet, peaceful labor. He was a small part of a great, quiet rhythm, and his life, he knew, was a gentle, unhurried song in the heart of the village. He slowly straightened, his body a low, gentle creak of its own, and he stepped back from the great wooden supports. He took a slow, deep breath, his lungs filling with the rich, wholesome air. He let his gaze rest on the old mill, his heart full. He was home, and all was well. He was a keeper of the wheel, a guardian of the grind, a man whose work was a quiet, sacred refuge, a place of peace and purpose. The moon, now a patient silver coin, hung high in the velvet sky, its light a soft, luminous presence that streamed through the narrow, dusty windows of the mill. The air inside was now a quiet, living presence, thick with the scent of fresh grain and the soft, constant creak and swish of the water wheel. A low, rhythmic murmur, the sound of the millstones turning, was a reassuring presence that spoke of quiet, purposeful labor. Old Henrik, his work in a steady, rhythmic flow, felt a gentle contentment settle in his bones. The long night of honest labor was nearing its end, and it was time for the quiet work of tidying and rest. He moved through his mill, his movements slow and deliberate, a man in no hurry at all. He made his way to a small rack on the wall, where his wooden tools were kept. He took them down, one by one, feeling the smooth, warm wood under his strong, weathered hands. The small wooden shovel, its handle polished to a beautiful sheen, felt cool and solid in his grasp. He ran his hand over its surface, feeling the fine, powdery film of flour dust that coated it, a tangible reminder of the night's work. He took a small, soft cloth from a peg, and with a gentle hand, wiped the dust away. The sound was a low, soft hush, hush, a gentle whisper that spoke of a work that had been done with care. He hung the shovel back on its peg, a quiet, final act of respect for his tools. He then moved to the millstones, where a fine, white film of flour dust coated the wooden trough. He took a soft brush made of straw, and with slow, patient strokes, began to sweep the dust into a small, clean pile. The sound was a soft, rhythmic swish, 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 a gentle scratching of the straw against the rough-hewn timber. The fine, white cloud of dust rose in the lantern light, a soft, ethereal mist that danced and swirled in the warm glow before settling back to the floor. The dust was so fine, it felt like velvet under his fingertips, and it smelled of the earth, of the sun, and of the quiet, patient labor of the field. He knelt, his knees finding the cool, hard floor, and he simply sat for a long moment, surrounded by the quiet, living presence of his mill. The sound of the water wheel, its low, constant creak and swish, was a perfect, peaceful song that filled the air. The distant murmur of the brook was a constant, lulling presence, a low, hypnotic whisper that seemed to speak of a deep and ancient peace. The air, thick with the scent of old timber and flower dust, was a comforting presence, a familiar perfume that promised a night of quiet, peaceful labor. He felt a deep sense of gratitude settle in his heart. The mill was at peace, and so was he. His work was a quiet, sacred refuge, a place of peace and purpose. He was a keeper of the wheel, a guardian of the grind, a man whose life was a gentle, unhurried song in the heart of the village. He closed his eyes for a moment, his head bowed, and he simply listened to the sound of the world breathing around him. He felt the cool air on his face, the faint, comforting scent of flower dust in his nose, and he felt a deep sense of stillness and purpose. He slowly straightened, his body a low, gentle creak of its own, and he stepped back from his work. He took a slow, deep breath, his lungs filling with the rich, wholesome air, and he let his gaze return to the softly turning water wheel. The moonlit wheel, its silver reflection shimmering in the dark water, was a final, peaceful vision of his night's work. He felt content and in perfect harmony with the quiet, sleeping world around him. The moon, now a patient silver coin, hung high in the velvet sky, its light a soft, luminous presence that streamed through the narrow, dusty windows of the mill. The air inside was now a quiet, living presence, thick with the scent of fresh grain and the soft, constant creak and swish of the water wheel. A low, rhythmic murmur, the sound of the millstones turning, was a reassuring presence that spoke of quiet, purposeful labor. Old Henrik, his work in a steady, rhythmic flow, felt a gentle contentment settle in his bones. The long night of honest labor was nearing its end, and the mill was now a place of perfect peace. He moved to the small, low table by the hearth, where a small fire of kindling and peat still glowed, casting a warm, orange light into the room. A small iron pot, its contents a simple, nourishing brew, rested on the stones near the fire's edge. He reached for a simple clay cup, its surface smooth and cool to the touch. He poured the warm amber liquid from the pot into the cup. The steam rose in a gentle, fragrant curl, a soft, ethereal mist that danced in the warm glow of his lantern. The scent of the herbs, a gentle perfume of chamomile and wild mint, was a clean, wholesome aroma that promised a quiet comfort. He held the cup in his strong, weathered hands, feeling the warmth of it seep into his palms. A gentle, soothing heat that chased away the night's chill. The weight of the cup was a familiar comfort, a solid, tangible presence in his grasp. He moved to a low wooden stool and sat, his hands resting on his knees, and he simply held the cup, savoring the warmth and the gentle aroma. The only sounds were the mill's own peaceful song, the low, constant creak and swish of the water wheel, a rhythmic lullaby that filled the cool night air. The distant murmur of the brook was a constant, lulling presence, a low, hypnotic whisper that seemed to speak of a deep and ancient peace. The air, thick with the scent of old timber and flower dust, was a comforting presence, a familiar perfume that promised a night of quiet, peaceful rest. He closed his eyes for a moment, simply listening to the quiet harmony of his surroundings. He could feel the warmth of the cup in his hands, a perfect small comfort in the immense stillness of the night. The mill was at peace, and so was he. His work was a quiet, sacred refuge, a place of peace and purpose. He felt a deep, profound sense of gratitude for this time, for this quiet, solitary moment of peace. He was a small part of a great, quiet rhythm, and his life, he knew, was a gentle, unhurried song in the heart of the village. He brought the cup to his lips and took a slow, deep sip, the warm, fragrant liquid a soothing, gentle presence on his tongue. He let the taste linger for a moment, savoring its simple, clean flavor. He closed his eyes, and a wave of profound, peaceful calm washed over him. He was home, and all was well. The gentle sounds of the mill, the warm cup in his hands, and the peaceful scent of the herbs, all of it was a perfect, peaceful blend. He let his head fall back slightly, his body relaxed, and he embraced the quiet calm of the night, a silent, grateful companion in the stillness.